I still contend the biggest beneficiary of Mitt Romney running out of the race is Scott Walker. And basically it's because on the right, they think he's fundamentalist enough for them. And on the other part of the right, they think he is economically fundamentalist enough for them too. Remember, this is a guy who made his name by attacking unions in a state that has a huge history of progressive unionization. This is a guy who 8 years ago, his political operation and the Americans for Prosperity political operation were essentially the same thing. Same personnel. I don't know if the AFP existed at that time, but they basically all came out. And when they did exist in Wisconsin, the guy was working for both the campaign and AFP, more or less. And the Americans for Prosperity is the Koch brothers. And the Koch brothers have said, we're going to put $900 million in. The only other major players you have out there, at least at this moment, are guys like Sheldon Adelson, who may say, like, I'm just going to change the dynamics of this race by adding another $10 million into it overnight. $20 million into a specific race overnight. Sheldon Adelson is animated by two things: a hatred of non-Israelis, essentially, in that region, all Arabs, and a hatred of unions. Those are the two things. Those are the things that animate him. It's true, ethnic cleansing and gambling are sort of sidelights for him. But that's what animates. And so he's a guy who could get behind a Scott Walker. So I think Scott Walker is, on the right, going to end up being their consensus choice. Now, there is a slight problem with that. And that is Scott Walker is largely an idiot. Now, it's not necessarily a problem on the right, but the problem for Scott Walker is that at one point, the national media is going to start paying attention to him and ask him if he is really qualified to be president. Here is Scott Walker. You should know that about a week or two ago, maybe it was a month ago, when talking about national security, Scott Walker was saying, the interesting thing was, as a governor, I would talk to the National Guard in Wisconsin, who would meet with the FBI, and we would have all sorts of talks about national security. This is, Sarah Palin, I can see Alaska from my house. So then he's on, what CBS show was it this weekend?
This week with Martha Raddatz.
This week with Martha Raddatz. And here's Scott Walker on talking about what should have happened in Syria.
Let's talk about some specific. And you talk about leadership, and you talk about big, bold, fresh ideas. What's your big, bold, fresh idea in Syria?
Well, I think I go back to the red line.
Let's not go back. Let's go forward. What's your big, bold idea in Syria?
I think aggressively we need to take the fight to ISIS and any other radical Islamic terrorist in and around the world, because it's not a matter when they attempt an attack on American soil, or not if, I should say, it's when. And we need leadership that says clearly, not only amongst the United States, but amongst our allies, that we're willing to take appropriate action. I think it should be surgical.
You don't think 2,000 airstrikes is taking it to ISIS in Syria and Iraq?
I think we need to have an aggressive strategy anywhere around the world. I think it's a mistake.
But what does that mean? I don't know what aggressive strategy means. If we're bombing and we've done 2,000 airstrikes, what does an aggressive strategy mean in foreign policy?
I think anywhere and everywhere we have to go beyond just aggressive airstrikes. We have to look at other surgical methods, and ultimately we have to be prepared to put boots on the ground if that's what it takes. Because I think,
Boots on the ground in Syria? U.S. boots on the ground in Syria?
I don't think that's an immediate plan, but I think anywhere in the world...
You wouldn't rule that out?
I wouldn't rule anything out. I think when you have the lives of Americans at stake and our freedom-loving allies anywhere in the world, we have to be prepared to do things that don't allow those measures, those attacks, those abuses to come to our shores.
High on a hill was a lonely goat herd, lay, hoodle-lay, hoodle-lay, loud was the voice of the lonely goat herd, lay, hoodle-lay, hoodle-oo. Oh, ho, lady, hoodle-lee, oh, oh.
So let me get this straight. We should take other surgical methods. We should employ other surgical methods aside from surgical strikes. And those other surgical methods would probably be like, we should probably put, I don't know what, we should do sutures. And we should be doing catheters.
I would use laser beams, Martha. And, you know, if there wasn't this big, liberal, politically correct a government that says red lines, won't even use the phrase radical Islam, we could probably literally have...
My policy for dealing with national security is that everything's on the table. And I don't see that happening under the current surgical type of situation.
I see pepper. I don't see salt.
And it is interesting to sort of lead into with this election. And I think it's obviously important to understand who these candidates are at this point. But when they get up in these debates, it's all going to come out in the wash. And what's going to happen is people are going to realize there's nothing there. This is just a parade of frickin' morons. Remember, at this time in 2012, people were like, Rick Perry, he's the next president of the United States. Remember Rick Perry? It took him just like one time on the national stage until people were like, oh my God. And I mean, honestly, think about this. Rick Santorum, all that you have right now, if you really want to do, this is how you can play pundit, okay, on TV. Just look at who is a foil for who. So Rick Santorum is going to go after Jeb Bush, and is going to go after Scott Walker, and talk about how they don't have any foreign national security experience, although he does because he was on the Senate blankety-blank committee 15 years ago or whatever it was. This is the way that they're going to work this. They're just all going to be looking for foils. And they're going to pick 2 or 3 who are in the different parts, and that's basically what they're going to do. And that foil is going to be ahead in the polls, and when they need a certain credibility with a certain group of people, that's who they attack. It's going to be crazy.